Hello and welcome to LMC-TV's Meet the Candidates. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive and your program host tonight, where we're going to speak with the candidates who are running for village office in Mamaroneck on Election Day, November 5th, and as we'll mention again, for the early voting period that begins on Saturday, October 26th. We're joined by Mayor Tom Murphy, who will be running for a second term as mayor, by Kelly Wenstrup, who will be running for a term to continue her service on the board that she was appointed to earlier this year, and Nora Lucas, village trustee, who's running for her second term as trustee. So thank you all for being with us today. We had a prior conversation, so we're trying to pick up where we left off and talk about some of the issues that hopefully will be helpful to the voters as you assess the candidates and make a decision on Election Day. Let's talk, first of all, since all three of you serve on the village board, let's talk about accomplishments. What do you consider to be the things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished during your tenure on the board? Tom?
Well, George, there's been a lot of things, from making the work sessions open to the public and to have everything be transparent, to the way Mamaroneck Avenue looks right now. We repaved Mamaroneck Avenue after having not been paved for a long, long time. It's decorated very nicely. There's new signage that's very welcoming to the community. There are very few closed shops, and that's just a cyclical thing in a business cycle. So the avenue is very vibrant. The park was extremely busy this year. We renovated the spray ground, which has been a hit for the past 15 years, and it was even more of a hit this year with the new equipment. And we paved almost a lot of streets in the village of Mamaroneck. We've lowered the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, and we did a zoning law change to really put the brakes on the overdevelopment that had been happening in this community for the past 10 years. It was unbridled development, which was changing the character of our community. And we have stopped that trend, and hopefully we'll be able to maintain the friendly village that feel that we've all come to know and love.
Now, the accomplishments obviously are shared by the other members of the board.
Absolutely.
But Nora, Kelly, is anything that, as you look at your service, your tenure, I know, Kelly, for your purposes, it's been a fairly short period of time, anything that you want to point to as something that you feel proud of, an accomplishment that...
Sure. I feel particularly proud of our law that passed to limit development. It was called PLLC, which is how I'll always hold it in my mind, but that doesn't make sense to anyone else. It's our law to limit development and to really require some affordable housing initiatives in the village. What was so good about the process, I thought, and I came in at the end of the moratorium, at the beginning of really hammering out the law, was that the work sessions were not only open, they were televised. So people could really watch and see what we were talking about, what the community was saying, how we were addressing the community's comments. It was the most transparent process I'd ever seen in watching the village for over 14 years. And I think we came out with a law that respected opinions that were voiced, that reflected what we heard. There was a lot of study that went into it. I just thought it was a good process. Not perfect, but a good process.
And Nora, anything that you want to highlight as an accomplishment, something you're proud of?
Yeah, so what I'm most proud of is that when Tom and I ran, Tom kept saying that we want to make this the best run village in Westchester. And when we got into office, we realized that there were some things that were not running smoothly. And one of those things was our financial review process. So we weren't doing budgets real time. So we were paying bills and then at the end of the year transferring money because line items weren't complete. And so we've stopped that process, which means going forward we will have actual numbers when we do our budgets. And we've also embarked on a 5-year capital plan because our capital budget was kind of like a wish list. So we're really budgeting, and we're in very strong financial shape, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be careful with the money. So I think we've done a very good job about putting in more stricter financial controls and being more responsible, and that was lacking for the previous 8 years.
There's always a set of key issues that people talk about. They're the issues on the minds of most people. Let's touch on a couple of those. Perhaps the most highly visible one is the land use issue, the proposed development at Hampshire Country Club, which I gather is before the planning board now. Tom, what's your take on where we are in Hampshire and where you think we're going to be going?
Well, it's before the planning board right now, and they're doing the environmental review process. So I'm of the opinion that whatever the planning board decides after going through the process and going through the rigorous review is fine. If they decide that it's a project that would benefit the community, then we go with that. If they decided a smaller project would benefit the community, then we go with that. If they decide this is not an appropriate project at all for the community, I'll support them on that. What I didn't support was a developer coming in, buying a piece of property, and then going to the board and saying, you need to change the zoning so I can make more money. Because that is an extremely slippery slope. If we allow developers and real estate investment trusts to come into this community, buy a piece of property, and then get it zoned for whatever they want, what's the point of having zoning? Where will we be at the end of that? And I don't believe that people buy property like that and make that huge request unless they've gotten some indication from the previous administration that that was a request that would be looked upon kindly. And thankfully at the time there was a majority Democratic board, so that didn't happen. But we need to make sure that we're looking out for our residents. And if the people who are appointed to the land use boards decide that this is a project that would benefit our residents, so be it. But if they don't, then I will support them with what I'm sure will be litigation from the developer. But I think it's really important that we stand up for the laws of this community. And I'm pretty solid on that.
Well, this is the fundamental reality of home rule that exists in New York State, where the villages or the other neighboring communities, whether they be towns or cities, have the right to make its own land use decisions through planning, through zoning, and then through what the village board may approve or not approve. And of course, that project's been on the public mind for quite a while. Another issue that's been on the public mind for a while is tennis, Harbor Island. And while for some that may not interact with it, Kelly, it may not be that much of an issue. But for those who do use that facility, it's a public issue. So where do we stand as we look forward to what's going to happen down at Harbor Island with tennis?
Yet another issue that was hot when I joined the board at the end of April. The Sport Time contract, which had been a long-term 17-year contract, was coming to an end. And there's a question about tennis and whether there should have been year-round, we should continue year-round tennis, just summer tennis. Who should run it? The Parks Department? Should we have professionals running it? And should we, and let's pay particular attention to making sure we're not alienating parkland, so that any agreement that we have with an outside vendor is very strictly compliant with the state law. And so we have an extension for 1 year with Sport Time to continue operating. We were able to get some additional benefits for residents, free tennis lessons over the summer. But now we have a tennis committee that's looking at what will be best for the village as a whole with respect to tennis at Harbor Island. They're looking at environmental impacts. They're looking at what we want generally, and I think we've got really dedicated people working on it who are putting in a lot of hours, and I think we're going to come up with good recommendations to go forward. It was just something had ended, and now we're moving forward.
Can I just touch on one thing
Sure.
Kelly's talking about? I just want to point out, that Kelly was new to the board, and she jumped on this issue and really has shown a lot of leadership. And it's not an easy issue, and for someone who's new to take that on and take it on so well speaks well of her and her being on the board.
Well, and also on a board of 5 people, there's an element of teamwork as different
Without a doubt.
individuals really focus on certain things. Nora, you touched on before a little bit about the capital plan and how that fits into a more comprehensive look at the village. You've been identified as a person who looks at these things over an extended period of time. What do you see as the way Mamaroneck Village evolves in the years to come?
Well, I'm pleased to say that we are updating our comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2012, and that was largely to the credit of Victor Tafur, who, when he was elected, it was 5 years after the plan was adopted, and he said it's time to look at it again. So we're looking at it, and we put it a little bit on the back burner because of the moratorium. Although I think the moratorium and PLLC have fed into what we want for the village's future. And so we're adding a sustainability chapter, a component to this, talking about flooding, environmental issues, Vision Zero, bike safety, all of the kinds of things that are good for quality of life and are going to allow this village to move into the future. And we're also evaluating neighborhoods. So we're doing a neighborhood study where we're thinking about what the characters of the neighborhoods are, how we can maintain those characters, and how we can modify the zoning to make sure that the village doesn't change in ways that people are, as we walk, are complaining about changes that have been made, physical changes to the community. So I feel like it was, the moratorium fed well into the comp plan update, and so it was good to take a pause because we sort of finished another chapter and now we're going back to it.
Well, and when we talk about many of these functions, there are volunteers working through various committees that are part of the decision process. You've mentioned the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals. They're directly land use issues. By my calculation, you have a Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee, you have a Council on the Arts, you have a Council on Environmental Issues, a Tree Committee. Perhaps you want to touch on some of those other areas of citizen involvement, because the bigger the community, the less of that there seems to be. The smaller the community, the more that's volunteerism is part and parcel of how you make decisions. So which ones have I missed? Any other major ones that?
Traffic.
Traffic Commission?
Fire department, we have an all-volunteer fire department. We all were just at their inspection dinner, and they save us God knows how many millions of dollars a year for not having to hire professional firefighters.
While keeping us safe.
While keeping us safe.
Right. And that is, more the exception these days in the area south of 287, where it's hard in many places to find enough volunteers who are young enough and able enough to actually fight the fires on the current basis. Tell us a little bit about the professional staff. What's the structure of the village government as people interact with it, the different departments, the different things that they would see as they deal with the village?
Well, the village is structured that the chief executive officer is not the mayor, it's the village manager. The village manager handles the day-to-day decisions of the community. All the other department heads answer to him, save the police chief, who answers to the Board of Police Commissioners, which is the 5 elected officials. But he works closely with the village manager. We have the clerk treasurer's department, like if you're coming in to buy a permit, or if you're paying your taxes, or if you want records, you go to the clerk treasurer's department. The village manager, if you have a complaint about a street problem, he'll take the complaint and then give it to the appropriate department head, usually DPW. And we have a great parks department and rec department, where a lot of people have accessed the recreational opportunities, send their kids to a great day camp. And you guys can, talk about some of the other DPW, and we have a planning department, which not all communities have.
It was really helpful during PLLC. I mean, we couldn't have done it without it.
Because they were working, they were turning things around really quickly.
We put them through their paces. We did a lot of changes, and they had to reconfigure things constantly.
And it's not a large number of paid officials that work for the village.
No.
There are people who have to produce a lot of effort and a small group of people working together.
And they do work together. I mean, they do work together.
They have a staff meeting every week, especially after a Board of Trustees meeting. And then they assign different tasks, and they also work well in tandem. That staff meeting allows them to exchange ideas.
Right.
And also, I don't want to be remiss, we have a harbor master who takes care of one of the busiest small boat harbors on the East Coast.
And a beautiful set of
gorgeous
slips and places where boats can use. I've seen people come to the area as they travel on the Post Road. Mamaroneck, more so than any of the other Sound Shore communities, has a front window right out onto the harbor, and it really does reflect well on the community.
And it's a beautiful sheltered harbor. So you could safely moor your boat without wondering if it's going to end up in the North Shore of Long Island.
Well, it's a great harbor. I mean, you can see with the way Orienta and Shore Acres point out, it creates a safe component here. We're here at the studios of LMC-TV, Larchmont Mamaroneck Community Television, which may be the single biggest example of intermunicipal cooperation, in that the village of Mamaroneck, the village of Larchmont, and the town of Mamaroneck come together to perform this function and do it better than many other places where each of those entities would have their own show. What are some of the other initiatives where Mamaroneck Village works in a shared capacity on one or more things? And if there aren't those examples today, are there any areas where you think intermunicipal cooperation could be helpful as you look to the future?
Well, one thing that we are doing, which I think is really important right now, is we are a part of a tri-municipal complete count committee for the census. And I think that's April 1st is the day. And so we're trying to make sure that everybody in all three of our communities is counted, because that's important in terms of the resources we get from the state and federal government. So that's something that we are working on together.
We have the ambulance district where the three communities have pooled their resources, and it works well. These three communities have historically worked well together. And right now, I can honestly say that there's a great relationship between myself and Nancy Seligson and Lorraine Walsh, and we talk a lot, and we share ideas a lot, and we commiserate a lot together. I just want to point out one thing about LMC-TV. Recently, the village board approved purchasing a van for LMC-TV because we could get the van $7,000 or $8,000 cheaper through a state contract than LMC-TV could. This came out of a meeting we had at the Board of Control where we thought, well, it's going to cost them this much. Why can't we take advantage of our buying power? So that was a good. So we're going to buy the van. The town of Mamaroneck is going to supply the gas for the van. So it's a real, something that's. And the van will be used to promote visibility for LMC-TV and a remote kind of studio for LMC-TV. LMC-TV at one point, the village and LMC-TV were talking about them taking over the firehouse. But that actually would have been a disaster because it would have depleted all of LMC-TV's resources, and it also, the franchise fees are tending to go down because less people are getting cable television. So it would have been unsustainable for LMC-TV going forward. So this is a way that they could have more visibility and still stay financially viable.
When you look at the broader picture of Mamaroneck, Nora, you grew up here. Kelly, Tom, you moved here at some point in time in your life. What were the reasons that you and your family made the decision to come to this community? What did you see in this community that represented a place where you wanted to plunk down, or, Nora, in your case, to stay, to make this your life's home? Because so much of public policy comes down to the decision makers and how you view them as individuals, what their motivations are. Because the issues that may come up in the next 2 years may have nothing to do with the question we could think of today. But it's who is Tom, who is Kelly, who's Nora as a person. And the decision to either move here and stay here or to grow up here and stay here is intrinsic in understanding how you might deal with those issues. Who would like to go first?
Well, I mean, my husband and I are both from this area. We both went to Mamaroneck High School, and we moved to Boston when we first got married. And we loved Boston, but we decided we really wanted to both be back here. So, and we came, and we ended up in Rhinebeck. We rented a house in Larchmont first, or in the unincorporated section, and we bought a house in Rhinebeck. And I'm an architectural historian, and we bought an historic house, and we renovated it. And we're still on the same street, different house, same street, but we love it here, and we both want to give back to the community because we feel lucky. We feel lucky that we can both work here. We can work. My husband has off and on worked in New York City. I worked in New York City. It's just a great area to be in, and we're here for the duration. Happy to raise our daughter here.
Well, we came here not really knowing the community. My son and he's my oldest, he was in first grade, and we came here because we loved a house in a neighborhood. We were in Orienta, and it's an old house with a lot of character. But we were right on the edge of kickball, soccer, Little League, and we had started that in our old community. But when we continued it here, I was amazed by the people, and I'm still amazed. It's the friendliest bunch of people, and they're interesting to talk to. The diversity in the community is amazing. I mean, you really do talk to a diverse group of people everywhere you go. Whether you're out to dinner, whether you're down at the fields, you're meeting with a lot of people. We're not a homogeneous group. We're really mixed. I mean, there's a vibrancy here that I love. I would say to Dave all the time, can you believe this place? Like we felt like we hit the jackpot. You know, it was just so different. So I think it's the people. I have to say, I think it's the people here.
Tom?
Well, you know, for me, George, I started coming up to Mamaroneck in 1979 when I started dating my ex-wife. So I knew the community before I moved here. And I came out of the west side of Manhattan, and back then, and not so much now because it's become a very transient area, but back then, neighborhoods in Manhattan were like little villages. Like, you knew everybody from 14th Street to 25th Street. And that was, you know, and there had been, my family and a lot of families had been there for generations and generations. So when that changed in Manhattan, and when we were thinking about having children, and at the time there was a lot of violent crime in Manhattan, it seemed natural to me to move to Mamaroneck, first of all, because it's, you know, an easy commute into the city, and it's very walkable. And I needed a place that I could walk to and from, because that's part of what I like to do. But also, it reminded me of the neighborhood I grew up in. It was very diverse, as Kelly pointed out, and I grew up in a very diverse area of the city. And I mean, for lack of a better word, it had a lot of characters and character. And you know, there were people, and you know, recently we've put in these chatting benches where you could sit down. If you sit on that bench, you have to be willing to have a conversation. And I love that because, you know, that's part of, you know, growing up in a city. It was about telling stories, and it was about, you know, who could tell stories and, you know, who had a better story. And that's part of how you really get to know people. And it's part about how you really get to know a community. When you listen to people's stories and you find out who's related to who and who grew up on Wood Street and what used to be over there, I love that kind of stuff. So I kind of have replicated the area I grew up in Mamaroneck. Right. And especially like the long-time generational is here. And as I pointed out before, and my daughter is having a baby and will be the third generation child.
Congratulations, Grandpa.
There you go.
I'm in that club already. So. It's a great club to be in, I might add. With the looking to the future issue really can involve things that are unexpected as you look down the road, challenges that you'll face that are not, you know, framed at this stage of the game. But in most of these situations, you have a pretty good predictability of how you're going to handle the next budget cycle. Now, of course, we've, at the county level, been able to deliver some revenue to the village, hopefully, which will help you. How do you see the fiscal structure of where you are today and how that's going to play out in the future? Obviously, we don't want you to try to predict tax rates, but give us a sense of the fiscal stability of the village as we stand today.
Well, I think Nora touched on this with the long-term planning and really being involved with the budgeting a little more. We have also this new village manager who has been terrific at really finding some cost savings, pushing department heads to find some cost savings. And we're a flood-prone community. And with global warming or climate change, I think we're facing flooding more than ever. Flood events, we have invested in some flood mitigation controls for our stormwater system, which will help with, I hope, keep our systems a little cleaner. Our own truck will be available in emergencies, and I think what goes into the sound in our rivers will be cleaner as a result. I think with that long-term view towards the future, I think we'll be in better shape than perhaps we were before.
Any other comments?
I think that the long-term capital plan makes a difference because we have to really be careful. We have to be cognizant and be able to fund the unexpected expenses. And we know that we have to replace more of our infrastructure. I mean, all the communities have old sewer systems. We have to replace that. The sewage treatment, the water facility is going to be updated from the joint water works. So I think that the more we can be the more fiscally responsible we can be, the better off we'll be in terms of having padding for any kinds of emergencies. But I mean, I think we're very strong. We're a fiscally strong community, but we want to stay fiscally strong.
Yeah, I just want to point out, George, in the past 2 years, we've been under the tax cap both years, and we've been able to add to the growing surplus of the village. So we're very proud of that.
And that's a good stable point going forward. We just have a few minutes left. Obviously, it's never easy when you're inside a campaign to judge how the campaign is going. But I assume you're out there knocking on doors. What do you hear? What's the campaign tenor like? What are you feeling out there?
Yes, sir.
Well,
Go ahead.
So I have
I know you're going to jump on something.
So we have over 70 AP Gov students from Mamaroneck High School who are working on our campaign. Right. So it's a little daunting to keep 71 kids busy. So I think it's up to 73 now, but it's been great because they're all enthusiastic. So we've been canvassing with them. We've been having a lot of our long-term volunteers canvassing with them. Kelly, Tom, and I have walked with them. We've taken pictures with them. They come up with great ideas. So that's very exciting, and I think that judging by the people who picked our campaign and not another campaign, I feel like there's just a lot of support for us in the community.
Good vibe.
Good vibe.
I just want to point out, we're running against opponents who, they have a off-brand line, the party, but they are running. At least two of them are running on a conservative party line. And I encourage people to look at what the Conservative Party stands for. And I don't think those are values that are held by most of the people in this community. So, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are.
Okay. Now, I've just got 2 minutes left. So let me just highlight, first of all, that we do have early voting this year, which we have not had in years past. And early voting begins on Saturday, October 26th. That's a good 9 days or so in advance of Election Day. Election Day itself is Tuesday, November 5th. And as we always have, Election Day, polls open at 6, they close at 9. And in all of the normal polling places, United Methodist Church, Columbia Firehouse, the high school, Mamaroneck High School Library. We've got Mamaroneck has a polling place and volunteers, and Mamaroneck Avenue School, and people, the VAC location on Barry Avenue, North Barry Avenue Extension. So I think, and of course here in the town center, which is a part of where we're based now. So all of those places on Election Day, 6 to 9. But early voting starts on Saturday, October 6th. If you live in Mamaroneck, as you do, Nora, where will you be voting for early voting?
211 Halsted Avenue, which is the
and that's in Harrison.
In Harrison, at the Veterans Building, which is right near the Parsons School. So it's in the town of Harrison. So all of the town of Rye is in the town of Harrison. So Mamaroneck is there. And
you're in the Mamaroneck side. Kelly, you're here in the Mamaroneck town side, and you'll be voting
in town center,
right here,
which is right across from, say, Boston Market on the Post Road.
Such to know you know Boston Market more than you know where your town hall is. That's how we Americans operate.
In case you know.
So,
right.
As we get ready to close out in just a few minutes left, it's your decision on November 5th, and in the time up to November 5th. Early voting will be conducted in half-day situations. So call ahead, call town or village hall. They'll tell you the details. Tom Murphy on the ballot for mayor. Kelly Wenstrup on the ballot for village trustee. Nora Lucas on the ballot for village trustee. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, George.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you, viewers. Make the intelligent decision. Look at the candidates, and there's a League of Women Voters Guide you can look at as well. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.